Hello and welcome back to BEBB and welcome to another Let's Get Deeper episode. So what were you doing at 12:15 a.m. on the 19th of June 2017? While many of us were probably in our beds sleeping, maybe even some out, that was the moment that a 48-year-old by the name of Darren Osborne drove a van into a crowd of Muslims outside a mosque in Finsbury Park in London. And on the sofa today, I actually have the brother of one of the very survivors of that very attack, the one and only Bashir O Ibrahim.
He didn't pick up, and then I called him again, and I just remember what he said.
Oh my gosh.
He just said, Bashir, I can't talk, I'm in the ambulance, I've been hit, I'll talk to you later. So he said, what we can't do is let mum know what's happened.
Oh my gosh,
because
okay.
she will crumble, try and divide the bonds of Londoners, even though we don't really talk much on the tube. I advocate for, and other people may advocate for other things. But one thing for me is, I always encourage people, it's political engagement and political activism, okay? Some people tell me I don't do politics. Well, if you don't do politics, politics don't do you.
That's right.
The story I was reading, I remember it was in the BBC, and a guy was going for surgery. It was and his anaesthetist was of Asian heritage.
Oh,
and he said to him,
this.
And he said to him, and he was the anaesthetist said, "Oh, are you not supposed to have left the country by now?" Islamophobia does not manifest itself, and did not manifest itself on June the 19th last year. It did not. It is a daily occurrence. It's not. Sometimes it's microaggressions. Sometimes it's all-out aggression.
BEBB presents Let's Get Deeper with your host Nissy Tee.
Hello and welcome back to BEBB and welcome to another Let's Get Deeper episode. So what were you doing at 12:15 a.m. on the 19th of June 2017? While many of us were probably in our beds sleeping, maybe even some out, that was the moment that a 48-year-old by the name of Darren Osborne drove a van into a crowd of Muslims outside a mosque in Finsbury Park in London. I, of course, heard about it the next day and was devastated and disgusted by what happened. And on the sofa today, I actually have the brother of one of the very survivors of that very attack, the one and only Bashir O Ibrahim. And I'm so glad I said your name right. So that's a good start. A good start. How are you?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me onto your show today.
Thank you so much.
I'm doing well, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that's so important but seldom spoken about, you know, in certain circles.
Oh,
so,
definitely.
You know, I mean, it's a privilege to be here, to have this platform to talk about these really important issues. Yeah.
Now, obviously, your brother was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today, but that's absolutely fine. We're going to try and dissect as much as possible through you. But before we get into all of the stuff that happened, obviously, really, really traumatic and horrible thing that happened. But let's start with you as a person first, because we met recently.
Yes.
We met not that long ago. Literally, I think like maybe 2-3 weeks ago.
I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, literally a couple of weeks ago at an event, and it was a kind of like politically focused event. And I met you, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're flipping amazing. We need to talk. But you do a number of different things. You want to tell us a little bit about your journey and where you're at now and what you do? Yeah,
certainly. So professionally, I do a lot of PR work. Going back, my background is typically of a science background. I had a degree in biomedical science, a master's in cancer biology.
Wow.
But then I kind of went into the international development sector and started doing public relations, public affairs sort of work there. And then having left that, I went into TV and broadcast and started doing a bit of that. So, you know what I mean?
Okay. How does that work? You went from, biomedical science to, what was it, cancer?
I done a master's in cancer biology.
Cancer biology.
Yep.
Then you went into broadcast.
And so I went into the international development sector.
Okay.
And then the aid sector, and I was doing comms. I was in a comms capacity there. Okay. And then I went over to do some TV work and you've
pretty much done everything, like across the board, everything.
And then having done that it was quite a short spell, 6 or so months, I'm now working on a political campaign. It's the Brexit campaign that I'm now working on. So so that's just kind of my background, but I'm also heavily involved in the Labour Party. I'm the Black Asian Minority Ethnic Officer for a local ward within Islington North. Labour Party. But one of the things that I'm most passionate about is, and I've always positioned myself as an anti-racism campaigner. So I've debated UKIP prospective parliamentary candidates before.
Right.
And I've delivered talks at various universities. I've penned articles. You know what I mean? It's something that I feel very passionate about, that I feel like no one should be discriminated against. And racism is a cancer within society that should be eradicated. Wow.
So you do clearly a whole bunch of different things, but I feel like they all have, like you kind of said, you drew it all in together. They all have kind of one purpose, one aim, all mostly fighting against racism, Islamophobia especially.
Being a voice for the voiceless.
Right.
Trying to, so one of the things when I was doing at the International Development Charity, I went out to East Africa whilst there was a drought there, and I was doing pieces to camera. Then I came back and started doing some work with the Disasters Emergency Committee. So I feel like when you put it on an umbrella term, it's just being a voice for those that sometimes deny the voice or seldom heard, and their voices are deliberately misheard or not heard. So
I love that.
I feel like that's my daily life.
That's you. That's genuinely you. And okay, so I have to ask, where did this passion, this desire to, you know, to be that voice for ultimately the voiceless, where did it come from?
Honestly, I don't know. I think the first time I experienced racism was I was about 6 years old, and I was with my cousin in a laundromat. And I was really ill that day, and I was coughing, and I remember there was this very elderly white male, and he must have said something as he was leaving. He said, keep your black germs away from me.
Wow.
At that time, I was
6, so you're a child.
So I didn't understand at that specific moment, and then I must have told my cousin when that guy just shouted at me, you know what I mean, in a juvenile voice, you know what I mean, and she was like, what did he say? And I must have told her, she was stormed out of the laundromat looking for him, and at that point he had gone, because I think I didn't tell her immediately. And I think since then, I don't know, it's just something that was quite innate in me. Do you know what I mean? My parents came and moved to this country from Somalia, and I know the opportunities that I have, but one thing I feel really passionate about is when people are discriminated against, where people are you know what I mean, treated unfairly and things like that. So because of something that they may not be able to control, do you know what I mean? Whether this is sexism and it comes down to their gender, whether it's racism and it comes down to their race.
Yeah, definitely something you can't control.
Whether it's a choice of religious manifestations that they do. So going after people, you know what I mean, the Sikh people being attacked because they wear the turban, or Muslim females wearing the hijab. Yeah, this is disgusting, and it won't happen as long as I'm alive and I want to talk about it. And I would challenge that. That's not cool with me. I'm trying to fight. I'm trying to fight against that.
You're trying to but you're saying it in the most politically right way and the nicest way. Please remember that let me just tell you right now, okay? With this show, we keep it real, and we say things as they are and how you are. So don't feel like you have to necessarily be that. Because trust me, I've met Bash outside, and he does not play when it comes to it. So I can genuinely say that you are somebody who really is fighting for fighting against injustice and fighting for just people to be treated like the human beings that they are, and not to be discriminated against, not to be made to feel less than. Sorry, and it's an incredible thing to see, and your passion.
Can I just pick up on that point? You just said being treated as human, and what you see a lot from bigotry, from racism, from a lot of these cancers, as I call it, is they try and dehumanize you. 100%. You're less than human. Refugees aren't human. And I remember Katie Hopkins, you know what I mean, was referring to them as rodents and rats. When you invoke this sort of language, it evokes other imageries and saying, actually, I mean, if they're rats and rodents and things like that, or they may not be as important as a human. So that's something I want to pick up on. You said humans, and 100%. A lot of the work that they do is trying to dehumanize communities.
Right, and kind of going into that as well, I think that perfectly links into obviously that night, that evening. So as I said at the beginning, that was an evening where your brother was one of the people, unfortunately, who was outside the mosque in Finsbury Park, and literally this man took a van and decided that he was going to run down Muslims because he had a vendetta against Muslims, didn't like Muslims, and we can go a little bit into what he said and his motivation, all that kind of stuff. But what would you say was your reaction, or talk us through that night? How did that night, or how were you contacted? What were you told? What happened for in your perspective?
So so there's two mosques very close to each other in Finsbury Park. So my brother, the one in question, prays at one, you know what I mean, slightly away. They're about a minute away from each other. So I was at the other one, and I think I must have been... I was hearing a lot of noise. I think there was helicopters. I was hearing sirens and things like that. But I was like, okay, you know what I mean?
So you were up at this point. So you were still up.
I'm up because this was during Ramadan. Just to make it absolutely clear, this was during Ramadan.
Right.
So people, a lot of Muslims
would be up. Of course.
Were at the mosque at this time. So there are supplementary prayers that you can do during the month of Ramadan. So there was a lot of Muslims, and I'm talking about in the hundreds, if not, you know what I mean, in excess of 1,000. Wow. So there's a lot of Muslims out, and this was at the peak. Of Ramadan. So I think I must have got home, and I just saw things on my TV, and I was like, oh, I must have hightailed it back down to Finsbury Park, and I literally live 2 minutes away, and I'm calling my brother because I know it was just literally around the corner from where we pray, and I must have called my brother, and he didn't pick up, and then I called him again. And I just remember what he said.
Oh my gosh.
He just said, Bashir, I can't talk. I'm in the ambulance. I've been hit. I'll talk to you later. And he put the phone down. And he didn't answer calls.
Oh my God.
For about 4 hours, we were unable to get in touch with him. And so what happened was, one of my other brothers who doesn't live with us also got onto the scene. And he's like, have you heard from him? I was like, yeah. And he said the exact same thing to me. So he said, what we can't do is let mum know what's happened. Oh my gosh. Because she would crumble. So literally, we just had to make a little pact amongst ourselves to say, until we ascertain details, let's keep it stum. Let's keep it between us.
So your mum had not seen any of this? She hadn't seen it on the TV?
And she's calling us saying, bro, now I'm like, yeah, we're all here. She's like, where's your other brother?
Okay,
you know what I mean? Abdurrahman, he's called. Yeah. And I was like, oh, he just popped to the shops and stuff, you know, he's a bit thirsty. And stuff like, we are plotting a lot, because we just didn't want to concern her, because he was just... you know what I mean? He has a special place in my mum's heart. So we were just trying to. So at that point, I went on the scene. And one of the things that really concerned me was I was looking on social media and on just media channels. I mean, on my phone, and the language that was being used, I was really annoyed about, because it said man lost control of his vehicle. Vehicle collides with pedestrians, as if it was a natural occurrence and it was just oopsie daisy. Look what's happened. It just happened. And it was very clear immediately, because once he was dragged out of the vehicle, Mr. Osborne was dragged out of the vehicle, he was shouting anti-Muslim sentiments.
What was he saying?
He was smiling, and he was like deaf to Muslims, and you know what I mean? It was very clear that this was not an accidental thing. Do you know what I mean? And what you'll see is, if you go back to the footage, when the police were putting him into the van, he was smiling. He was waving. Look at the footage. Wow. He was waving to all the people. Yeah. And that's where, as Muslims, I've never felt so proud when Imam Muhammad Mahmoud, the Imam from Finsbury Park Mosque, because a lot of people were angry. And he said, this is not what we do. Let us not attack him. Violence only begets violence, but let's not do that. And that's why I have to pay homage and tribute to the Imam of Finsbury Park Mosque, who went onto the scene and tried to calm things down and protected Darren Osborne until the authorities came. So that was immediately how I got to know the story and what happened on the scene. And then there were media organisations that turned up, and I just went into work mode, in a sense that, I mean, one of the guys, BBC, who used to be the former political editor of the BBC, Nick Robertson, lives locally, and he arrived on the scene and made a beeline for me and said, "What's going on? I heard something's happened." The head office called me, and I said, a terrorist incident has happened. You know what I mean? I'm speaking my language quite deliberately. A terrorist incident has happened. This has happened. That's happened. He's like, do we know the amount of people injured? I said, I don't have that information. And then what happened was, there was a few other media that turned up, and people getting quite annoyed, because it was quite evident what it was, but everyone's looking on their phones.
In fact, let's talk about that. Let's go straight into that, because that was one of the automatic things that when I first saw what was happening, I said, but why is this not being called a terrorist attack? Why? Because we know that the moment that someone of a particular colour, and this is not me necessarily coming to speak and put words in your mouth, but just how I see it, someone of a particular colour, the moment that they are a particular colour or a particular type, they deem a terrorist straight away.
Yes.
Straight away. But now this is a white man from Cardiff. He's come down from Cardiff. But one man died. So from what I understand of that incident, one man ended up dying. His name was Makram Ali, who was 51. And I think he left behind a wife and kids, from what I know. And 9 people were injured. To me, automatically, I was like, this is a terrorist attack. Now, you said you were quite deliberate in your language. Why did you do that? Why did you feel the need to counter that with the language that you were using against the fact that they weren't even using the word terrorist at all?
They weren't. So it's a very good point. I felt like what happened was very quickly, and there was some footage that came out, unbeknownst to me, of people surrounding me and me giving sort of impromptu interviews on the spot, and people were asking, and just people, it was literally a press pack. I don't know if you've ever seen a press pack, and people saying, and because I said, listen, because I had to get that narrative across straight away, and people were shouting and stuff like that, but I was able, especially in circumstances, bearing in mind my brother was injured, to remain calm. And like I said to you, I felt like I went to this automatic work mode where I was briefing journalists to say, this is what's happened, and it's a terrorist incident, please let your coverage of it reflect that. And I was showing them examples to say, and I'm not going to name names of the places that were using and driver loses control of vehicle and things like that, all these other silly headlines. But it was just, I felt like it was my duty, because I knew, because a lot of people were to a point that they were pulling the credentials of journalists to say, what, you're not going to do this now just because we're Muslims, this and that. And I said, I understood it, and I felt really conflicted at that point, because I understood the sentiments of the community.
You can understand why people are feeling so angry.
But I felt like we're not going to get our message across if we just show them anger and frustration. So I had to be that person to just say, because you don't know nothing, and these guys are not going to talk to you, because a lot of people, you'll see a lot of the footage, people play them around saying, I was one of the witnesses, okay, so what did you see? And be like, no, man, not talking to you. And people were taking a piss out of it, because you know what, you weren't putting respect on us. And I was like, no, let me go into my mode where I was briefing journalists to say it was a terrorist incident, and someone said, why are they not calling it that? And I said, I don't know why they're not calling that, because it was very clear. Because earlier on, I think a week or two before that, there was an incident on London Bridge. Right. And there were so-called Muslims who drove a vehicle deliberately into pedestrians and then jumped out. That was a terrorist incident. We had PC Keith Palmer. There was a Westminster Bridge attack a few months earlier. So it was, and what I automatically knew, and I'm willing to say it on this platform, it was very clear of what it was, because Muslims had assumed a different role. It didn't fit the narrative. Right. Because Muslims were supposed to play their position. They're supposed to be the so-called terrorists.
And they've now come out of that position.
They became victims. The media didn't know what to do. Yeah. How can you guys be victims? Are you sure? It was literally, and they weren't sure how to do it. And
did you feel that actually? Did you feel that there was a lot more questioning and a lot more prodding? Like, we have to be sure that this is what it was. We don't know the intent. How did you feel like that response was?
A prominent journalist said to me then, when I said to him, it's a terrorist incident, he said, let's not jump to any conclusions. We need to ascertain the facts. And that's a quote from him. And I said, now we need to do ascertaining of facts and things like that. It was really interesting. It's when Muslims were the victims, it wasn't a rush to judgment. It wasn't very quick. It was to say, hold on, let us take some time and deliberate and look over and things like that. And I was like, come on, let's call it, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I mean, it was because Muslims were the victims that you weren't quick to call it a terrorist incident. Even though it was, someone took, in the run-up to, I don't know if you ever saw some of the analysis of it, but especially in the 3 weeks before Darren Osborne done this, he was reading a lot of stuff from Tommy Robinson. And people call it this 3 week radicalization period for Darren Osborne, because it was literally,
it was after he saw a program, the three basically the girls that were what do you call the word, groomed. That's it in
Rotherham, I think.
That's it in, I think it Rochdale, I think it was, and he saw that, and all of a sudden allegedly, I think I have to say allegedly here, because I don't know, I'm not trying to get sued for nobody, but allegedly had watched this program and had, all of a sudden grew this hatred. And another thing that was actually found was that there was a letter inside of that van, and he had written basically about his hatred and his disgust towards Muslims, saying things like Muslims are rapists, Muslims are feral, Muslim men were preying on children, all of these, massive generalizations. But how did that make you feel, hearing that he was saying things like that?
Honestly, and I know this sounds quite sad, but what was it? What did they say? What's the phrase in the chicken came home to roost? I mean, this was a long time coming because there's been a fixation from media, from central government on Muslims. They brought out something called the prevent duty, which basically made it a statutory duty for teachers and doctors and nurses and other public, representatives of public bodies to keep and have a due regard for people being dragged into extremism. And what you don't understand is at the time, I remember speaking about this many years ago, 2013, 2012, 2013, 2014, and I was saying it's criminalizing the Muslim community. It was very clear about Muslim community, and there were so many children, Nissy, who've called Childline in the aftermath of the Charlie Hebdo incidents and all of these incidents, calling Childline, saying they've been called terrorists, they've been called the P word, they've been called Osama, they've been called, and these sort of things. So I knew it was a long time coming because what they've done is, it was a blind spot, and it was a major blind spot, far-right terrorism. And even then, 2016, there was the member of parliament, Joe Cox, was killed by a white man who was aligned with the far right. I don't know. Some people, it was quite scattered. Some people called that a terrorist incident. Some people called it a hate incident. But it's something that has been on the rise. So we had the EDL, and then you got Britain First. Now there's a new cancer on the streets called Football Lads Alliance.
Sorry to even interrupt you, but it was almost as though, because people are so focused on what Muslims are doing, or it's kind of like even fits in kind of like stop and search. Because you're here doing so much stop and search, which focuses mostly on the black community, and especially young black men, that you forget about other areas in society. And it's almost like that. Then it gave space for those radical West, what do you call it? The radical people from the far right, from the West. Wow, radical people from the far right, space to grow and to develop.
But that's what it is if you allow those spaces to develop, why not? And that's what I'm saying. In that time, whilst we've been focusing on the Muslim community, the EDL have come to fruition, Britain First have come to fruition, and the Football Lads Alliance have come to fruition. There's other ones, Liberty GB, this is a political party apparently, talking about best of English and whatnot. And I'm saying, listen, there is a big, and many academics have spoken about this, to say there is so many people. Every time it's Muslim communities, there was a young student in primary school, and she must have drew a little picture, and they was like, oh, what's this? And she said, this is, and she was trying to say a terrorist house, but she couldn't pronounce it, so she said, this is a terrorist house. The police come up to go to visit the house to say, we heard your daughter said this is a terrorist house. She meant terrorist. Like, use your common sense.
I guess it's also there's a big fear, and because there has been kind of like that sensationalization. It's been sensationalized almost about terrorists, and that's where we have to fight, and that's who we're fighting against. I feel like everyone's very hypersensitive, so things like that almost make people feel like, oh no, we must jump on it. But again, like you said before, it leaves a blind spot to other things that are happening in society when you're focusing on that so much. One of the things I did want to ask you to kind of step back just a little bit. So we got up to the point where your brother has obviously spoken to you on the phone. He said all of this stuff to you. You and your other brothers have now made a pact and said, you know what, we're not going to tell mum because mum will freak out, and we don't want her to like pass out. And I know, listen, you're African, so I have an African mum. I know my mum, hand on head, everything, fall on the floor. It would be a whole lot of dramatics and all that kind of stuff. So then we get to the point where you've now made that pact. To walk us through then what happened after that, and how you got to meet your brother, and how was he when you finally got to see him?
So I think he was taken to a hospital where So we had to kind of divide ourselves up. So a couple of us went back to the house to continue the narrative of he's just going to the shops. That must have been quite a long queue at the shops. And then one of my other brothers, went to hospital to go see him. So he was there. He was injured. But the thing is, his friend who was standing to the right of him. So my brother got the tail end of it. So I think it was just he managed to jump out of the way, but still got hit by the van, but it wasn't his whole body. But the person next to him actually went underneath the entire van. So I remember my brother saying, listen, I don't give a... I don't give a sugar about me. He's in intensive care at the moment, and he's like, I'm not leaving the side of my friend. And then in the aftermath of that, you know what I mean, he was on crutches for a while, had issues with mobility, but then now recently it's because he had a lot of, because that psychological trauma. He was diagnosed recently with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So he was just saying, because he has that imagery so vivid in his mind of the van always coming towards him, that he had trouble sleeping in the immediate aftermath, and then to this day he's still receiving that psychological support to say. So he's on the mend, and there was other people there as well, so the community. But I was so proud of the Finsbury Park community, Islington Council, because we rallied together and we said we will not be divided, and we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. Jeremy Corbyn that morning was there. Theresa May, for all my dislike of her, was there. Everyone came together and said, no, not in our name, this is wrong. And I felt really, especially in those difficult circumstances, I felt immensely proud of being British, of being a London resident, but specifically being from the Finsbury Park community, where we've got such a large, diverse community, but we've got a large Muslim community, that we just rallied together and we came around. So yeah, in the aftermath of that, my brother is doing well, he's on the mend, but he's obviously still dealing with that psychological trauma of the incident. But I want to take this conversation slightly away.
No problem, go ahead.
We need to analyse what, like we said, it's the blind spot of central government. But one of the things that I'm really concerned about this government, Nissy, is sometimes the Muslim Council of Britain, which is the largest representative body of Muslim organisations, have called for an inquiry into the Conservative Party around Islamophobia. As you remember, a few years ago when the mayoral election was happening, they were really calling into Sadiq Khan. They were calling into question his faith quite a lot. Quite nasty stuff.
It was a massive. It became part of forefront of questioning of why he should become mayor.
And then since then, so last year, Bob Blackman, backbench Conservative MP, hosted a notorious, what I call a Hindu, who's called for the eradication of Muslims, the death of Muslims. And this is an MP from the governing the governing party of the government of the UK. But that wasn't the most shocking thing. Amber Rudd, then the Home Secretary. Obviously, things have changed in the past couple of weeks.
Just a little bit.
At that time, she was the Home Secretary, and she went to that event and also spoke at that event. And there was uproar to say, how dare you legitimise these voices that are talking about the killing of Muslims. And then her team were like, oh no, she spoke and she wasn't speaking at the same time that he was speaking, and
how convenient.
X, Y, Z, and it was saying, oh, I think there was a very flimsy excuse. As you can remember, I didn't remember the BS that was fed to the media, and then I remember the Tory party had to do damage limitation and just threw him under the bus to say his views are abhorrent, this and that. But you hosted him, you invited him, but not only, you know how hard it is to get a cabinet minister to come and speak. The Home Secretary came to talk alongside this individual. So what we need to, and then like I said, it's this blind spot of the government bringing out legislation, and the rhetoric around Muslims. Then it's only fair to follow that path to see that people are going to see the physical manifestations when people, and Brexit was the...
You're even going... Sorry, give me a second. No. Right, let's breathe for a second, because clearly you can tell that you're passionate about this, and I love it. I love it.
Just to let the guys know, I would love to be sipping on some of the liquids, but I'm fasting. It's Ramadan.
So it's fine. So he can't. Don't worry. He's not being like stingy with his cup. But let's even talk about that. Let's talk about the language that is used around Muslims right now, whether it be with mainstream media, whether it be with news outlets, whether it be with wherever. There is a strong rhetoric, a strong narrative that I think most of us, we know now. We've gotten to the point where we can't even deny it and pretend, oh no, it's fine. No, we know. A strong anti-Muslim narrative that has come from different areas, like I said, from media, but also from government. And then we obviously had Brexit, which, while some people, talk about like trade deals and blah, 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 it's good for trade and the globalization and all this kind of stuff. I'll speak for myself anyway. From what I saw, a lot of the focus was about immigration. Now, when you talk about immigration, you always think about the other. And with a Muslim, with most anyway, with some like you wear hijab or whatever, you can tell straight away, with some people that you are the other, as it's seen. What do you feel about that rhetoric that's constructed, and how do you see it being almost deconstructed? Do you ever even see that even happening? Can we change that narrative at all?
So just to answer the tail end of that question, I always believe change is possible.
Right.
I think we need to understand something's happened in recent times.
Right.
Because that racism has become normalized.
Yeah.
And I don't know where this has come from, because what I kind of see some of the you know what I mean, the red markers of this, where politicians were really changing the way they were talking about people in the terms of immigration, and there was fair criticisms, and during Ed Miliband's tenure as Labour leader, there was this sentiment that they were trying to, because UKIP were really threatening the mainstream political parties a few years back, and then the Conservatives were trying to out-KIP UKIP so their voters don't go over there. Right. And Labour were like, no, we want to say some interesting things about immigration that really didn't fit with what they were doing. And it was just, and so from a political point of view, and I come from that political background, I found that rhetoric, because once you see the mainstream politicians normalising it, using some of those language, so there's Philip Hollowbone, who's the MP for Kettering, and he tried to bring in some legislation to ban the niqab in the UK. I've spoken to you about Bob Blackman. I've spoken to you about a few of these other things. So that's what. So when you're seeing politicians, mainstream politicians, doing this, it's interesting. Malcolm X famously said, "If you're not careful, the media and the newspapers will have you hating those that are being oppressed, and loving those that are doing the oppressing." Yeah. And when we look at it every year, Nissy, without fail, we hear stories about how Muslims are trying to ban Christmas.
Of course.
Who? Where? I don't know where these people are coming from.
I think Muslims have other concerns rather than.
That's what I'm saying. To say,
you know,
Christmas and there was an article recently penned by Melanie Phillips where she was talking about anti-Semitism. Right. And she said, oh, anti-Semitism is real. Islamophobia isn't. Do you know what I mean? And this is not the first time. I know you look quite shocked and surprised. I
am, because I've actually not heard that one. Completely denouncing Islamophobia. It's not a thing. It's not real.
So Douglas Murray, who's also a well-known right-wing sort of media personality, has said that the word Islamophobia doesn't exist.
Wow.
And what her argument was, anti-Semitism is a demonization of a specific group. Islamophobia is only used to stop criticisms of the Islamic faith. And I said to you, Nissy, I don't know, you're from the Christian faith?
Yes, I am.
So cool.
Yeah.
I feel like you should feel like as well, that people can critique our faiths and say, actually, we might not believe in Jesus, we might not believe in this and that. That's fine. But if I were to now raise my hand for you and hit you because you are Christian,
that's what the problem.
I'm not. I mean,
I say it all the time. I say it all the time. I say that, you know, at the end of the day, we're different. We're all made different. We all have different backgrounds, faiths, beliefs, whatever it is. One thing about me is I don't mind if you have something to say. You want to question me about something. I'm so open to that. I'm willing to do it. As you know, I'm willing to do with other people as well, to question certain things. But there needs to be a level of respect for each other and for each other's decision, because I have made a decision that I'm going to follow a particular faith just as much as you have. You get to a point in your life, you make a decision, am I going to follow a faith, am I not? Am I going to do this, am I not? You've made that decision. I can't now come and tell you what you should be doing based on what I believe. It doesn't work like that, you know? And so I completely agree that there needs to be an element of just respect and understanding for different people.
That's a good point. And I feel like there should be respect in debates and discussions.
Yes.
That is devoid. And whether it's political discussions, whether it's religious discussions, there needs to be that level. But what we will never tolerate is hatred and hate crime and hateful speech. For me to then, you know what I mean, employ certain language about you and your faith is out of bounds, you know what I mean? 100%. And that's what I'm saying, in terms of, for you to feel like whether people are willing, and Muslims as a community, as a faith, we're willing to have those discussions, those debates, you know what I mean? And we're open to that. We do a lot of Islamic awareness work. But for you to pull a female's headscarf For you to, there was I think named Mohammed Salim from Birmingham, an elderly Muslim gentleman who was killed by a white male.
Yep.
And then this is where that has nothing to do with his faith, because you've taken his life. It's not a discussion of his faith. It's not a debate on his faith. And what I really want to stress home to your viewers, Islamophobia has real human consequences. I've spoken about it for many years, and then last year it came to my doorstep.
Right.
And I'm telling you, we're not playing the victim. When a female's telling you my headscarf was ripped off, she's not doing it for likes, for clout, for this and that, because someone's actually ripped off her headscarf. When I'm telling you that people are being attacked, where children in schools are being bullied, do you know what I mean? Where people are being criminalized, where Muslims, when we're going to travel, we understand that, you know what, we might just
have to take extra precautions, you're going to have extra time.
Because we're going to be stopped, and why are you going here, why are you going there, why are you doing this?
Right.
And we become, and as a Muslim community, there's a lot of work to criminalize us.
Right.
And when we talk about our experiences, it's to delegitimize those concerns, to say, actually, that's not true, that doesn't exist. And when I say to you, anti-Muslim hatred does exist, and Brexit, what Brexit done for a lot of racists was to legitimize their bigotry, to say, oh, overwhelmingly the country, I say overwhelmingly, it was 52 to 48%.
Yeah, it was very tight, but still
the majority of the country have voted for Brexit, so that must mean that we don't want any more immigration. The discussion, I work on,
and I think it was the voices that were heard.
Yes,
the voices that were mainly heard.
The media. So I'll give you, at the time, I think Farage was the leader of UKIP, and then Caroline Lucas was the leader of the Green Party.
Right.
And I think she's an MP. At that time, I don't think UKIP had any MPs.
Right.
So why is it that I think it was 70-1 ratio or something like that? He was on the media day in, day out, hour in, hour out. And what you do is, because as media we set the tone for the country. So if we keep showing you those faces, those views, and we keep giving them airtime, then guess what? People are going to start believing it, and not just that, Nissy, they're going to start acting upon it. And that's what we're seeing now, that people feel legitimized. They feel a badge of honor to say, you know what? I've got 52% of the country supporting me. And that's why if you look at the statistics, hate crime shot up the day after the Brexit vote. Shot up because people were saying yes. Well, you know, and there was a story I was reading, I remember it was in the BBC, and a guy was going for surgery. It was and his anaesthetist was of Asian heritage.
Oh, and he said to him,
and he said to him, and he said, "Oh, are you not supposed to have left the country by that?" And what you need to understand is racism is so insidious that someone is providing you medical care,
providing you with help,
and you're still challenging him, saying you shouldn't even be here. That is how, and that's why there needs to be a national conversation about racism, about anti-Muslim hatred.
That's what I was going to ask, because honestly, there's so much that we could get into and so much deeper that we could go. But what would you then say is I know there's not one solution, there's no one size fits all, but in your mind, what are some of the solutions that we could essentially put forward so that these things are not happening or don't happen anymore?
It's going to be quite controversial.
Okay.
But I feel like it's about...
We like controversial here. We do whatever we want.
And one thing I advocate for, and other people may advocate for other things, but one thing for me is I always encourage people, is political engagement and political activism, okay? Some people tell me I don't do politics. Well, if you don't do politics don't do you.
That's right.
And I said it to people.
That's
one of my famous quotes, I know in a previous episode you had some quotes from lovely Vanessa. This is one from Bashir, okay? It says, be counted or prepare to be counted out.
Wow.
If you're not at the table when decisions are being made, then you know what, you're going to be left out. And that's why I say to people, I say occupy spaces. Go into, have the visibility where you can advocate for your faith.
Okay, so you need to say, because I know that there's probably a lot of young people that are watching this, because a lot of young people feel, we always have conversations where you hear young people, they feel disengaged, they feel like they can't join the conversation. How would you advise them, if there were just a couple of ways that you could advise them, especially young people now we're speaking to get involved, get into politics, get their voices heard? What would you say to them?
So if you're at school, get involved in a debating society. If there's not one there, then go and contact your English teacher and say, I've got views, I need an outlet for them.
Right.
Get in touch with your local councillors, and your local councillors say, what are you doing for young people? Have your voices heard and say, actually, I feel like this playground hasn't been refurbished in 20 years, and you're affecting my life, and you have a voice. And what happens is other people have ways of expressing their voices. And what you see is, in terms of a lot of people, it depends on where they come from. So a lot of people know how to navigate things.
Right.
And for us, we don't get political education. That's a separate discussion. That's a discussion for government. That we need to really embed that in our national curriculum, that we now politically engage our young people. Because people get to 18 and it's like, what are these... I mean,
what is this? What's voting? What's parties? What's seats? Right.
One of my friends who...
It almost feels like it's a bit late.
One of my friends who's a PhD student called me yesterday. He's a PhD student.
Yeah.
And he said to me, Bashir, what's the difference between a councillor and an MP?
Wow.
And it's not his fault.
It's not at all,
Because he's just like, what is going on? Because for me, as I said, I'm involved in the Labour Party and I do a lot of work with black and minority ethnic people.
Right.
But people don't know. So I feel like the way you can get your voices heard is by occupy spaces. If you're an adult, if you're grown, go and do stuff. Go and be a parent. Go and be a governor at school.
Right.
And get involved with your local communities. Do something where you're in spaces where people can't ignore you anymore. Do you know when you've got a black female on a panel, for example?
Right.
Best believe she's going to be advocating for her, not just her womanhood, but she's going to be advocating for her black people as well. So when you're in spaces, you can be a voice where people are saying, maybe we shouldn't do this. It's saying, oh, actually, this is an issue that's facing the Muslim community. Maybe we should do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So be present.
Be in the conversation.
Be in the conversation, because you know what? If you're not in the conversation, nobody's going to come over to you and try and give you a plate. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So you need to go there and sit at the table and say, cool, what we're discussing today.
Right.
And that's what I say to people. Be governors, be councillors, go to local community groups, stand up to racism.
Right.
There's so many active groups out there where you can do things. And like I said, I can give shout outs to so many different groups here. But don't. And one thing I will say to people, please, don't be an armchair critic. Don't sit on the armchair and say, the world's messed up, look what's happening. Be the change that you want to see. I mean, go out there and do stuff. But if you're not, please, I get annoyed with people who sit on the chair. Please, I get annoyed with people who sit on the chair.
Right, they've gotten to a point, but it's almost like they're not utilising what, where they are, what they're doing.
Change don't come from armchairs.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? When we look at our history, it comes from,
those that are marching at the forefront.
Do you know what I mean? And shouting and protesting and campaigning. Right. And that's what I'm saying. So we need to mobilize as a group to say, you know what, let's do something, coming together. But also, like I said, it's just different ways. You know what I mean? Why can't you do different things? Like one of my friends now, she's black. She's a trustee of a local community centre. Just do stuff. And so people are saying, we can't ignore these people.
And it doesn't even, one thing that I do want to add as well, just for people that might be interested in these things, it doesn't even necessarily have to be, I'm going to end up in Parliament, which could be the aim, and you should be the aim, but it could also be within your local community. Go to local council meetings, local parties, all that kind of stuff. But listen, there's so much that we could go on to. I have just one final question before we leave. So you've mentioned how you're an advocate and you do all of these different things, but one thing that I wanted to kind of go back to tie in with obviously what happened with your brother, etc., was that the man who did this, Darren Osborne, was found guilty, which I'm assuming now he's serving time in prison. I don't know if he's serving time now, but I'm assuming he is. Did that ever give you peace? And where is your brother? Because you said that he suffers from PTSD as well. Where is your brother currently? And do you ever think he will ever get back to himself and who he was before that night?
So to answer your question, it's a very good question, Nissy. Amazing interviewer here.
Wow, thank you.
But it doesn't give closure, because that was just one. How many more people are plotting against the Muslim community and feel legitimized and justified in what they're doing? So that's one thing that's happened. But I'm scared of what's going to happen next.
Right.
That was a terrorist incident. But I'm telling you, on a day-to-day basis, Muslims are being attacked online as well as in person. Hijabs are being pulled off, being hit in the head, and having stuff thrown at them. So what I'm saying to you is, Islamophobia does not manifest itself, and did not manifest itself on June the 19th last year. It did not. It is a daily occurrence. It's not. Sometimes it's microaggressions. Sometimes it's all-out aggressions. So what I'm saying to you is, yes, there was that piece of closure, and I remember my brother went to I attended some of those court proceedings.
Right.
But the conversation hasn't ended,
yeah.
And there's so much more work to be done that we don't see a repeat of that. But I think the second part of your question is, in terms of my brother, it's some of these experiences are life-changing.
Right.
And I think it's something that will always remain with him. To really see your life flash before your eyes and have a vehicle come towards you. And then have a close friend who was seriously injured. It's something.
How is the close friend?
Yeah,
Did he manage to get through it?
Yeah, so he's. I mean, there's a lot of support there and things like that. But in terms of a lot of people within the community are still struggling. I was in the mosque yesterday with one of the other victims, and after the night prayers, Tarawih, and it's just, and people are trying to build that back up. And like I said, the local community have been amazing, but it's something that will stay with them for the rest of their lives, I believe, because there's certain things that you never get over.
Of course.
But hopefully, in time, I believe time, is a great healer of things, and I hope that going forward, that people are, because it's really hard to say to someone who, I don't know, has something life-changing happen to them. For example, if they're a rape victim, to say, will you ever be able to get over that? Do you know what I mean? I feel like that they may be able to get on with their life, but that will always be a part of them and something that happened to them. And I feel like it's similar to this thing, to say, my brother got married earlier this year. He's expecting his first child.
Congratulations.
So he's getting on with his life. But
it's still
of him that he has to deal with. So it's and like I said, it's, please, if there's one take-home message, Islamophobic.
I was going to ask you, clearly somebody else that's coming here and doing my job.
I'm on the job.
No, I'm joking. But yeah,
it's Islamophobia is real, and whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Sikh or Hindu, whether you're black or white, whether you're male or female, racism, discrimination, sexism will not be tolerated, because you know what, we're a great country, and we thrive based on our diversity.
Right.
We thrive based on our diversity. And people love us. People always come to this city, London especially, because of our diversity. And trust me, there will not be no Darren Osborne, no so-called Islamic State fanatics that will try and divide the bonds of Londoners, even though we don't really talk much on the tube.
We go on the train, everyone's minding their own business, but we love each other, really. We've got each other's back. And hopefully that same, that bond and that strength can be something that can spread across the country, because I do feel like we are an example in London. I've been born, raised, brought up in London my whole life. And it is incredible because you go to school with loads of different types of people, it opens your mind, but hopefully it is something that does spread. But thank you so much for coming today. Thank you so much for just sharing your passion. Thank you for your activism. I just want to encourage you and just hope that you will continue to walk in that activism, that you'll continue the fight, because we have to keep going. We have to keep going. So thank you so much. All the best to you, your family, your brother. I hope, by the way, just a quick one, because they're probably wondering, how was it when you finally told your mum what happened? How did she react? She
was devastated.
Oh,
but we just said, at that time he got to the hospital, and
she must have wanted to beat you guys up for keeping that from her.
I think, but I think you're so concerned about him that you forget about the plotting and the scheming that we did over here. So, so she's fine now as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much again for sitting down. Thank you so much for your time. But once again, the incredible Bash O Ibrahim.
Yes.
There we go, I got it right. O Ibrahim, coming down to talk to us. There are so many ways that you can get involved in politics, and it is so important that you do. Politics literally affects every aspect of your life, and that's just how real it is. But once again, thank you so much to Bash who came on today. We'll leave all of the information for him and all the things that he does in the description box below, so make sure you check it out. And of course, we'll see you again next time.